Joining me right now is Niall Stanage, our friend from the Hill in Washington. Obviously, clearly, this is unprecedented to see so many people step down at once. Can we put this in context for the American people and compare it to what it would look like here in the U.S. if dozens of members of Congress and their aides and envoys and ambassadors just all of a sudden decided to quit?
It is very difficult to even find a parallel, Adrienne. It's an absolutely extraordinary situation where more than 50 people have quit within the last 24 to 48 hours. We've had really bizarre circumstances like Boris Johnson, for example, appointing a new chancellor, the equivalent of a Treasury Secretary, who then immediately turned around and called upon him to resign. Really wild scenes in Britain. But obviously, as you say, a very dramatic fall from grace for Mr. Johnson, having won the most number of seats for the Conservatives in 2019 since 1987, the glory days of Margaret Thatcher, as British Tories would say it.
And obviously, Boris Johnson's name has been synonymous with scandal over the years, particularly the situation regarding pandemic parties or private parties being held during the time of lockdown in the UK. What was the straw, though, that broke the camel's back here? Because he seemed to evade any resignation prior to this week.
That's right. And then this week it all came tumbling down. The reason it came tumbling down is a man by the name of Chris Pincher, who was in the government in a senior position, not a particularly public-facing role, but a very sensitive one as Deputy Chief Whip. Mr. Pincher resigned amid allegations that he had groped two men drunkenly. And as that development percolated through, there became a controversy around whether Boris Johnson had known about previous complaints about that kind of behaviour. Johnson initially said he didn't, he wasn't aware. Then the explanations became vaguer. Then it finally emerged that Boris Johnson had been told some years ago about a complaint against Mr. Pincher, for which Mr. Pincher had apologised, and that apparent disingenuous or deceit on Boris Johnson's part seems to have sealed his fate.
But is it deceit? Or is it just, I forgot? Because what I'm reading, again, I'm endeavoring to catch up with all of the British press, the BBC, the Sun Times, and it appears that he either was mistakenly misremembering what happened with Mr. Pincher. But in terms of deceiving the people, is that the perception in the UK?
I think it is the perception, and I think that goes to Boris Johnson's record, which is quite a checkered record when it comes to truthfulness. Now, in isolation, is it perhaps believable that someone would have forgotten something that they were told 2 or 3 years ago? Maybe, but unfortunately for Mr. Johnson, he has developed a reputation for being economical with the truth, as our British friends like to say. And that has really caused him serious trouble in this circumstance, because clearly a large number of members of his own party don't believe the final explanation that he settled on.
Well, and again, there are many sides to every story, especially now and especially in politics. But this leaves so many vacancies in UK's government. It's just remarkable. Some could say that not only did these ministers abandon the Prime Minister, but they've abandoned the British people. How does this affect the global economy and US-UK relations?
So there's obviously going to be a lot of uncertainty in the short term. We don't, for example, know if Mr. Johnson is planning to resign with immediate effect, whether he'll hang around until a successor wins a Conservative Party election or not. There are posts that have to be filled one way or another. People may go back into these jobs in a sort of a caretaker, temporary role. It certainly introduces a degree of instability when Britain, like the United States, is suffering with very high inflation. There are obviously other issues there as well. Now, it is worth pointing out that the government itself in Britain doesn't fall. This is a parliamentary system, not a presidential system. Whoever becomes leader of the Conservative Party will become Prime Minister, and there won't be a need for, well, shouldn't be a need unless circumstances change, for a new general election. That could change for complicated reasons I won't go into, but there will probably be a Conservative Prime Minister who will succeed Mr. Johnson, and then things will presumably stabilise from there.
Possibly, but it could take a couple of months for that person to be elected to the office. Niall, always good to see you. We'll check in again as soon as we can. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.